What I propose here leads directly to a reconsideration of bisexuality, to reassert the value of bisexuality, hence to snatch it from the fate classically reserved for it, in which it is conceptualized as neuter, because, as such, it would aim at warding off castration. Therefore, I shall distinguish between two bisexualities, two opposite ways of imagining the possibility and practice of bisexuality. 1. Bisexuality as a fantasy of a complete being, which replaces the fear of castration and veils sexual difference insofar as this is perceived as the mark of a mythical separation, the trace, therefore, of a dangerous and painful ability to be cut. Ovid's hermaphrodite, less bisexual than asexual, not made up of two genders but of two halves, hence a fantasy of unity, two within one and not even two wholes. 2. To this bisexuality that melts together and defaces, wishing to avert castration, I oppose the other bisexuality, the one with which every subject, who is not shut up inside the spurious phallocentric performing theatre, sets up his or her erotic universe. Bisexuality, that is to say, the location within oneself of the presence of both sexes, evident and insistent in different ways according to the individual, the non-exclusion of difference or of sex, and starting with this permission one gives oneself, the multiplication of the effects of desire's inscription on every part of the body and the other body. For historical reasons, at the present time, it is woman who benefits from and opens up within this bisexuality beside itself, which does not annihilate differences, but cheers them on, pursues them, adds more. In a certain way, woman is bisexual, man having been trained to aim for glorious phallic monosexuality. By insisting on the primacy of the phallus and implementing it, phallocratic ideology has produced more than one victim. As a woman, I could be obsessed by the scepter's great shadow, and they told me, adore it, that thing you don't wield. But at the same time, man has been given the grotesque and unenviable fate of being reduced to a single idol with clay balls, and terrified of homosexuality, as Freud and his followers remark. Why does man fear being a woman? Why this refusal, Ablehnung, of femininity? The question that stumps Freud, the bare rock of castration. For Freud, the repressed is not the other sex defeated by the dominant sex, as his friend Fliess, to whom Freud owes the theory of bisexuality, believed. What is repressed is leaning toward one's own sex. Psychoanalysis is formed on the basis of woman and has repressed, not all that successfully, the femininity of masculine sexuality, and now the account it gives is hard to disprove. We women, the derangers, know it only too well. But nothing compels us to deposit our lives in these lac banks, to think that the subject is constituted as the last stage in a drama of bruising rehearsals, to endlessly bail out the father's religion, because we don't desire it. We don't go round and round the supreme whole. We have no woman's reason to pay allegiance to the negative. What is feminine? The poets suspected it. Affirms. And yes, I said yes, I will yes, says Molly in her rapture, carrying Ulysses with her in the direction of a new writing. I said yes, I will yes. To say that woman is somehow bisexual is an apparently paradoxical way of displacing and reviving the question of difference, and therefore of writing as feminine or masculine. I will say, today, writing is woman's. That is not a provocation. It means that woman admits there is an other. In her becoming woman, she has not erased the bisexuality latent in the girl as in the boy. Femininity and bisexuality go together in a combination that varies according to the individual, spreading the intensity of its force differently and, depending on the moments of their history, privileging one component or another. It is much harder for man to let the other come through him. Writing is the passageway, the entrance, the exit, the dwelling place of the other in me, the other that I am and am not, that I don't know how to be, but that I feel passing, that makes me live, that tears me apart, disturbs me, changes me. Who? A feminine one, a masculine one. Some? several, some unknown, which is indeed what gives me the desire to know, and from which all life soars. The peopling gives neither rest nor security, always disturbs the relationship to reality, produces an uncertainty that gets in the way of the subject's socialization. It is distressing, it wears you out. And for men, this permeability, this non-exclusion, is a threat, something intolerable. In the past, when carried to a rather spectacular degree, it was called possession. Being possessed is not desirable for a masculine imaginary, which would interpret it as passivity, a dangerous feminine position. It is true that a certain receptivity is feminine. One can, of course, as history has always done, exploit feminine reception through alienation. A woman, by her opening up, is open to being possessed, which is to say, dispossessed of herself. But I am speaking here of femininity as keeping alive the other that is confided to her, that visits her, that she can love as other. The loving to be other, another, without its necessarily going the route of abasing what is same, herself. As for passivity, in excess, it is partly bound up with death. But there is a non-closure that is not submission, but confidence and comprehension, that is not an opportunity for destruction, but for wonderful expansion. Through the same opening that is her danger, she comes out of herself to go to the other, a traveler in unexplored places. She does not refuse, she approaches, not to do away with the space between, but to see it, to experience what she is not, what she is, what she can be. Writing is working, being worked, questioning in the between, letting oneself be questioned, of same and of other, without which nothing lives, undoing death's work by willing the togetherness of one another, infinitely charged with a ceaseless exchange of one with another, not knowing one another, and beginning again only from what is most distant, from self, from the other within, a course that multiplies transformations by the thousands. And that is not done without danger, without pain, without loss, of moments of self, of consciousness, of persons one has been, goes beyond, leaves. It doesn't happen without expense of sense, time, direction. But is that specifically feminine? It is men who have inscribed, described, theorized the paradoxical logic of an economy without reserve. This is not contradictory. It brings us back to asking about their femininity. Rare are the men able to venture onto the brink where writing, freed from law, unencumbered by moderation, exceeds phallic authority, and where the subjectivity inscribing its effects becomes feminine. Where does difference come through in writing? If there is difference, it is in the manner of spending, of valorizing the appropriated, of thinking what is not the same. In general, it is in the manner of thinking any return, the relationship of capitalization, if this word return, rapport, is understood in its sense of revenue. Today, still, the masculine return to the self-same is narrower and more restricted than femininity's. It all happens as if man were more directly threatened in his being by the non-self-same than woman. Ordinarily, this is exactly the cultural product described by psychoanalysis, someone who still has something to lose. And in the development of desire, of exchange, he is the engrossing party. Loss and expense are stuck in the commercial deal that always turns the gift into a gift that takes. The gift brings in a return. Loss, at the end of a curved line, is turned into its opposite and comes back to him as profit. But does woman escape this law of return? Can one speak of another spending? Really, there is no free gift. You never give something for nothing, but all the difference lies in the why and how of the gift, in the values that the gesture of giving affirms, causes to circulate, in the type of profit the giver draws from the gift and the use to which he or she puts it. Why? How is there this difference? When one gives, what does one give oneself? What does he want in return? The traditional man, and she? At first, what he wants, whether on the level of cultural or of personal exchanges, whether it is a question of capital or of affectivity, or of love, of jouissance, is that he gain more masculinity, plus value of virility, authority, power, money, or pleasure, all of which reinforce his phallocentric narcissism at the same time. Moreover, that is what society is made for, how it is made, and men can hardly get out of it. An unenviable fate they've made for themselves. A man is always proving something. He has to show off, show up the others. Masculine profit is almost always mixed up with a success that is socially defined. How does she give? What are her dealings with saving or squandering, reserve, life, death? She too gives for. She too, with open hands, gives herself. Pleasure, happiness, increased value, enhanced self-image. But she doesn't try to recover her expenses. She is able not to return to herself, never settling down, pouring out, going everywhere to the other. She does not flee extremes. She is not the being of the end, the goal. But she is how far being reaches. If there is a self proper to woman, paradoxically it is her capacity to depropriate herself without self-interest. Endless body, without end, without principal parts. If she is a whole, it is a whole made up of parts that are wholes, not simple partial objects, but varied entirety. Moving and boundless change. A cosmos whose eros never stops traveling. Vast astral space. She doesn't revolve around a sun that is more a star than the stars. That doesn't mean that she is undifferentiated magma. It means that she doesn't create a monarchy of her body or her desire. Let masculine sexuality gravitate around the penis, engendering this centralized body, political anatomy, under the party dictatorship. Woman does not perform on herself this regionalization that profits the couple head sex, that only inscribes itself within frontiers. Her libido is cosmic, just as her unconsciousness is worldwide. Her writing also can only go on, without ever inscribing or distinguishing contours, daring these dizzying passages in other fleeting and passionate dwellings within him, within the hims and hers whom she inhabits just long enough to watch them as close as possible to the unconscious from the moment they arise. To love them as close as possible to instinctual drives, and then, further, all filled with these brief identifying hugs and kisses, she goes and goes on infinitely. She alone dares and wants to know from within where she, the one excluded, has never ceased to hear what comes before language reverberating. She lets the other tongue of 1,000 tongues speak, the tongue sound without barrier or death. She refuses life, nothing. Her tongue doesn't hold back, but holds forth, doesn't keep in, but keeps on enabling. Where the wonder of being several and turmoil is expressed, she does not protect herself against these unknown feminines. She surprises herself at seeing, being, pleasuring in her gift of changeability. I am spacious, singing flesh, onto which is grafted no one knows which I, which masculine or feminine, more or less human, but above all living, because changing I.